I really think making that album saved me through 2020 because that was a rough year on me. I mean, it was a rough year on everybody, but personally, artistically, it was a tough time. And making that record uh, with my producer at that time was it was pretty instrumental in getting me through that year, I would say.
Awesome. Well, nice to meet you, Hunter. My name's Adam, and this is about you and your journey in music. And we'll talk about the new song you just put out called Runaway.
Amazing.
Sweet. So first off, I always start with where you were born. Where were you born and raised?
Sure. So I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, but I grew up kind of all over the country. My family moved around a little bit for my dad's job, and so I spent some time in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I spent some time over in New York City. I relocated to the East Coast as a teenager, and I spent the bulk of my life in the Northeast, really, namely NYC and Boston.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like you moved around quite a bit. Was it like every couple years or?
Um, no, really. I mean, I would spend a pretty lengthy amount of time in every place we moved to. I mean, at least like 6 or 7 years at a time. But once I went to high school in Indianapolis as well. So we at one point we returned to the Midwest, and then as a teenager, I knew I was going to go over to the East Coast for college. And I took a gap year, so I went to NYC, spent a little time there, cut my teeth on the music scene there, and then I actually enrolled in Berklee College of Music in Boston, and I spent a good amount of time over there.
Amazing. Yeah, I was gonna see. It must be difficult to kind of move around, but it sounds like you're able to spend at least your, core like high school years in one spot instead of moving around, maybe like in the middle of the semester, middle of your high school career.
Right, right. That would have been tough, but luckily no. I was in one
Okay,
spot.
that's cool. So, what about music? How did you get into music originally?
Well, I got into music. I started training musically and starting like vocal lessons and piano lessons at a really young age, actually. And I've always just shown kind of like a natural inclination towards it. And my parents picked up on that, and they put me in piano and vocal lessons, I think starting at like 5 or something, because I was just
Wow.
all the time. And we had a baby grand piano in my house ever since I was born. And I just always was drawn to it. And so I think they picked up on somewhat of a level of natural musicianship within me. And they were like, okay, put her in lessons. Let's see where it goes. And yeah, so I've been singing really since I was 5 or 6 and playing piano around the same time as well. And then I started professionally around, I think it's 17. I started recording and writing and getting into the studio and whatnot.
Wow.
Yeah.
With having that baby grand piano in your house, was that something that like either your parents play or your
No,
siblings that play? It was just
no,
there.
it was just there. I really don't know why we got it. Honestly, now that I think about it, I've never actually thought about that. Because my parents, like no one else in my family really, I mean, they certainly didn't pursue it as a career, but
Uh-huh.
as far as I know, no one in my immediate family is really is drawn to music like that.
That's
So
interesting. It was just,
yeah, it is.
and I mean, baby grand pianos are beautiful. Don't get me wrong. So maybe it was just like a cool thing to own or have in the house.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That's cool. So you start off on piano and vocal lessons, and do you like when do you start? It sounds like yeah, at 17 is when you started to write music and record music, but like during the interim period, were you just performing? Were you doing like recitals and stuff like that, or like were you in a band, or like how did you, what did you take from 5 years old to 17? Like what was your kind of journey there?
At that point, I mean, I actually continued training more so in classical music through my
Okay.
youth, and I was involved in like children's choir and everything like that. Did like state competition, things like that, and then I got involved in theater in middle and high school. Continued taking private voice, and at that point, it was during high school that I started. I got a manager and I started like booking shows around the Indianapolis area, and I got a manager, and that's actually where I ended up making the connections that led me to my first producer, that I ended up working with, who I recorded my first music with, who I started writing with, when I was about 17. And so my management and the people that were kind of looking after me when I started to perform locally, they
Hmm.
actually that connection for me that brought me to my first team that I recorded music with, like for real, for real. Um, and so from like 17, 18, it just kind of took off. And the transition between doing like more classical music in middle and high school to doing more pop oriented stuff in my spare time, and after school and all of that in high school, that was interesting for sure. Because I would kind of like go to school and like do my like musical theater classical shit. I can curse on this podcast, right?
Yeah, 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 of course.
Okay, great. And so yeah, I mean, in the middle of figuring out that I wanted to do music full time while I was still in high school and I really wanted to go for it as a career, I was kind of juggling these two sides of me. Whereas, like I said, I would be doing like musicals and musical theater and more classical leading stuff during the day. I would go home from school and immediately just start, writing music and working with my vocal coaches who were not related to my school teachings at all. They were more of like an independent type of thing.
Hmm.
But they really like started transitioning my voice into more pop oriented stuff. And yeah, making that transition was just a weird time. But here we
Yeah,
are
was pop something you were interested in? Like,
always.
I mean, a lot of kids probably don't want to pursue like a classical music uh
Yeah.
career path, but maybe, I don't know. And then was it like was did you kind of instigate like, oh, I want to write my own songs, or I want to kind of shy away from the classical stuff? Like I'm appreciative that I learned it or whatever, but like do you remember that moment that you're like, I want to kind of do more of this pop, more music that I'm interested in?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do. I do actually, because I remember being in school and like bringing the stuff I wanted to do for my recitals to my like more classical leaning instructors, and they would be like, "Oh no. No, 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 no." They're like, "We don't your voice is way too pop like to be doing this stuff." Like, and even if I would bring in like more classical pieces, the type of vocal style that I would use when I would be like practicing or just in my lessons, they would just be like, "No, no, no. Your voice is way too pop to be singing like this. You got to switch stuff up right now." Because even when I was doing theater, just the style of voice that I was using, I mean, I remember my teachers like pulling me aside being like, "Hey, Hunter, like, we know you can sing, we get it, but like chill."
Oh,
Not
okay.
over there. you know but I always wanted to do pop music. Always. I've always been obsessed with it. I grew up being obsessed with pop music. I wasn't one of those kids that grew up, even listening to a lot of classical music,
Mhm.
um, or being moved by it particularly. I grew up being, really invested in just, yeah, like all these pop icons of the 90s and the early 2000s growing up. And yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to do that. So,
Mhm. So once you were able to kind of do that, I'm sure that was pretty freeing in a certain
yes,
degree.
definitely.
And you said that you were doing like shows, or you found a manager and you're booking gigs. Were you performing original songs, or were you doing cover songs? Like, where did that start?
It was mostly cover songs because I don't think at the point I started gigging, I was really super comfortable writing my own stuff quite yet.
Hmm.
I was still kind of finding my footing in my artistry and the type of music I wanted to do and who I wanted to be once I established myself as an artist. So at that point, yeah, I was like, doing cover band stuff. Um, Eventually, I started kind of like dipping my toe in the water of writing original music. And once that started happening and I started branching out and making more connections like throughout the Midwest, my mentors and vocal teachers, the more pop leaning ones, so to speak, made the connections for me to start heading out to California and
Oh,
working on
wow.
music there.
So when your manager found these producers, or kind of linked you up that way, were you still living in Indianapolis at the time?
I was, yeah.
Okay. And then were you going to, is that when you started going to where, like LA or something at that point? Or
I
no?
was actually going to Northern California, Bay Area, and
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I was in my senior year of high school, and all of a sudden I was spending probably like one weekend out of every month out in Northern California. And I was working with a producer named Narada Michael Walden, who is very well known for doing like Whitney Houston's early material, Mariah Carey, working with artists like that. And my managers just linked us up. And he was really the first person that let me get into the studio and just let myself go, you know?
And at that point, were you like, this is what I'm going to do?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
And you
It's kind of,
go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, it's okay. It was just happening at an interesting time in my life because like being 17 years old, I just remember like not being confident like in any
Right.
aspect of my life, really at all. High school's like tough for a lot of kids, and like it was
Mhm.
just to go from like what I was doing on an everyday basis to being able to like fly out to California and go just like be completely free in the studio and be completely free in a musical sense for the very first time. It was very eye-opening. And that that was an experience I'll never forget for sure.
Mhm. And once you had graduated, that's when you decided you took a gap year and moved to New York.
It did, yeah.
And why not like San Francisco area?
I was not moved really by San Francisco. I don't know why. No offense if anybody from San Francisco is watching.
I lived up there for about 5 years, but I don't take offense to it. I'm from San Diego. I'm Southern
Okay.
California. But I know I was just curious because you already had you had a connection there, and
Sure.
sounds like you were going there to record at 17, like, and then to be like, I'm gonna go. I mean, obviously New York is a happening spot too. So
Yeah.
I was just curious why you didn't decide to. Oh, I'll just go back and continue to work with this person in the Bay Area.
I think because I guess I missed this part, but actually during my in between my trying to think my junior and senior year, I did the summer program at Berklee College of Music in Boston,
Oh yeah, cool. Okay.
and that was not my first time to the East Coast by any means. I spent a little bit of time there as a kid actually in New
Hmm.
York, but I knew eventually that's where I wanted to go to school. Because I remember getting to a crossroads when I was 17 or 18 being like, okay, am I going to go to college? Am I not? Like, am I going to, just go straight for the career stuff and not even go to school? But I eventually made the decision to go to school, but I needed a little extra time to make that decision. So, and I had already made friends at Berklee from doing the summer program. And I knew eventually I thought that was where I was going to end up. I was going to, apply and try to go to undergrad there, which I did
Hmm.
eventually. But I did take a year and some change off in between high school and college to live in Manhattan. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, actually. But yeah, I was in New York City, and it just that was a wild time to figure myself out for
I
sure.
bet.
18
Yeah.
on my own in Brooklyn. But yeah, and so I knew the East Coast was in the forefront of my mind because I knew I eventually wanted to get to Berkeley and I wanted to be at school there.
Okay.
So I
So
decided,
so once you go to New York, I mean, you're in this gap year before you decide to go to Berkeley. Were you just trying to get involved in the music scene, like in the Brooklyn, Manhattan area, or like how do you get there and then it's like, okay, now what do I do?
right. Yeah, no, I did. I gigged around a little bit. I actually was dating somebody at the time when I was 18 who was living there. And so that was part of the motivation to go there
Oh, sure.
a little bit too. But yeah, no, I did try to get involved in the music scene there, had a great time. I don't know, 18 in New York City, there's like nothing better. It was a blast. Uh, and I
I
was like
bet.
fresh out of high school, so I was like out of my parents' house, and I was like, oh yeah,
Right.
I'm gonna just tear this place up. And
Sure.
yeah, that was a fun time. I think it was 2014, probably. Yeah,
Okay. And then you decide, like, was there a moment where, like, you know what, I really want to go to Berkeley. Like, I'm gonna see this through. Do you remember that?
I do. I do because I had learned so much and made so many amazing friendships and learned so much about contemporary music, during my studies at their summer program. It was just the time of my life. I did have a hesitation about pursuing it um, on an academic level again, like I said, because I didn't know if I wanted to just go straight into hitting the pavement, making the career stuff happen. But I ultimately did decide to go.
Hmm.
And that ended up being probably one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. And I say that not exclusively on this aspect, but I met, I mean, the connections I made at Berkeley, I cannot even begin to tell you how valuable those have been to this day in my life. Um, but yes, so 2014, 2015 rolls around and I'm at that point at Berkeley.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you meet people there obviously that have been a big part of your journey. And when was it just through writing songs there? Like when you get there, like are you what do you did you go for voice or songwriting, and like how do you start your kind of career as far as like you as an artist there?
It's so crazy reflecting on some of this stuff. I tell you, it's been a long journey for sure. Uh, I did go for voice and songwriting. I was a double major in vocal performance and songwriting.
Hmm.
Um, I met people who I actually currently to this day collaborate on my music with. Um,
Wow.
Firstly, through my classes and just, hanging out, networking, whatever you want to call it. But actually, in terms of the people that I work with on music with, I met
Hmm.
them after I left
Oh wow.
through mutual friends. But, still, meeting these people through Berkeley and through the connections I had established there. But yeah, I mean, when at Berkeley, you have so many opportunities to meet people that are interested in like the same kind of music you want to do and have the same career goals and who are oriented towards the same, you know, things that you have in mind for your career. And um again, I mean, I did not graduate from Berkeley. I actually ended up leaving early, but going to school there ended up changing my life completely. Um, j- just based on the people that I met and my education, because I don't take that for granted either. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, and if I wouldn't have done that summer program at Berkeley in high school, I don't think I would have ended up there. So
Yeah, and so you left to move back to New York City? Is that what you said? I love your coffee cup. That's cool.
thank you. Isn't this cute? It's different. Yeah, I like it.
Very
Um,
thick handle on that one. On my coffee cup.
but yeah, I did go back to New York. I dropped out of Berkeley after 2 or 3 years there. And at that point that I left, I met my current set of producers that I work with on all of my stuff to this day. And they were
Wow,
all Berkeley alumni as well.
very cool. And you started putting out music a little bit after that, or when did you put out your first song?
I put out
Um,
my first single in 2019 and I left Berkeley in 2017. Yeah, that's right. So I left Berkeley 2017, met my current day core
Team.
team,
Yeah.
producers, engineers, etc. Not all of them are Berkeley alumni, but a good chunk of them are. And we, I think, starting in 2018, got into the studio. I would fly out from New York to Los Angeles, where they lived, and
Okay.
started working on my first set of songs with them.
Wow. And then you put an EP out in 2020, I believe, correct?
Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, did you put it out before the pandemic or?
Well,
Oh.
and it was so frustrating because I remember obviously this EP had been planned for a while. I started cutting those songs in 2018. I mean, this is way before COVID. Obviously never could have anticipated that being the circumstances it came out in. Um,
Right.
no, it came out in April 2020. I mean, it was the early days. And
Oh,
it was a
wow.
bummer. It was a big bummer.
I
Uh,
bet.
but my first single, I think it was my second single I actually put out. It's called November, and that came out in November 2019. So luckily I had, a couple of months to really promote that song and hit it hard with that song. And I think to this day, that's actually that's the track I'm most known for. And luckily that came out enough time before the pandemic that I got to really like hit it hard with that track. But yeah, the EP came out right in the middle of lockdown.
Oh
So
man.
yeah,
And then you did an album the following year.
it did. Yeah.
And like, okay, so the first one was sorry, Scorpio Rising and then Scorpio Season, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So was the was the batch of songs done around the same time, or like why did you keep the name forward, or was there like an underlying theme for the whole thing?
Um, what was your first part of that question? I'm sorry.
Oh, I just said like it's, you know, you have Scorpio Rising and then you have the season, right? So like it was just kind of like the prequel to what the album.
Correct. Yeah. The original concept, I mean, I don't think when I first started writing the first batch of songs, I think I thought it was just gonna be a one and done, like one album type of thing, few
Uh-huh.
singles to culminate in an album release, which was gonna be called Scorpio Season. I think because of the success of November and kind of the organic groundswell around that song, I was really determined to put something out quick. So I was like, okay, let's do an EP, put November on it, put something out. Um, so then COVID happens.
Sure.
And I always knew Scorpio Season was kind of like the penultimate concept. That was going to be the big one. And I made that whole album in the fall and winter of 2020, 17 track album, big project.
Oh yeah, it's huge.
It was a monster for sure. But it was kind of fun in a way. I mean, I really think making that album saved me through 2020 because that was a rough year on me. I mean, it was a rough year on everybody, but personally, artistically, it was a tough time. And making that record with my producer at that time was pretty instrumental in getting me through that year, I would say.
Yeah, and you were in New York at the time as well?
I was, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, at first, and then I actually went back to such a not a great decision, but I actually went back to Boston for a year, 2020 to early 2021. But then I went back to New York, yeah, in 2021,
Okay.
early 2021, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like you didn't make the right decision, I guess, for you as far as your response to that, but moving back to Boston. But
No, that was a dumb decision, honestly. Yeah, that was a tough year. I made some dumb decisions, but
it happened.
we were all going through it. So
Right.
I was telling that story to my producer the other day, and I was like, God, that was a dumb fucking decision. But being in New York at that time sucked too. I mean, there was no good place to be.
Yeah, especially New York, you was like the mecca of how, I mean, that's what
Exactly.
was on TV all day, all day, every day. It was just how bad it was. I mean, it was bad everywhere, but that was really the boiling piece of the whole thing.
Yeah, dude, it was a scary time. Because I remember actually like being on my way out to like move back to Boston, and I actually got into because I was gonna go back pre-COVID. I started looking at apartments to go back for a year in like late January, early February.
Mhm.
And by the time I got out of Manhattan, drove up there, got into my new apartment in Boston, it was like March 15th or something. I mean, I got in there and it was a wrap. Seriously. Like I moved into my new place in Boston. I think it was like March 15th or 16th. And then like by the 17th, 18th, it was a wrap everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
Long time for me, for sure.
Oh,
And then
I
the
can't
EP
even
comes
imagine.
out, you know?
Yeah, exactly. The EP, and then you're moving. Oh my gosh. And then obviously COVID thrown into the midst of all that. Yeah, I can imagine that being hard. So, but when you put an album out, when you had the opportunity to put the album out, at least you had more, I think stuff would be more open, right? In 2021.
Mm-hmm. Because the album came out, I put out singles all through 2021. I was able to start shooting. I actually shot the music video for November in summer 2020. Skeleton Crew, obviously.
Hmm.
But I'm trying to think when I started performing again. I think by spring or summer 2021, I was out there in New York performing again in Manhattan.
Okay.
And at that point, the singles started rolling out for Scorpio season. And so I was out there promoting those. I was shooting a lot of music videos over that summer too for those singles that came out over the course of 2021. I was busy. I was booking it. I mean, I was just
Yeah.
through COVID, to a certain extent. And so I just kept working. And yeah, and it culminated in me dropping the album in November 2021.
Wow. And you're in LA now? Did you
I
move to
am.
LA?
Yeah, I'm talking to you in
Okay.
LA right now.
When did you decide to move to Los Angeles?
Um, in 2021, actually, shortly
Okay.
after I moved back to New York from Boston, I was like, nope, I gotta go to LA. I think I don't know if you've picked up on this, but I kind of have a tendency to like bounce back and forth between a whole lot of places. I love to travel and I'm a little
Yeah.
um maybe that feeds into my creativity a little bit too, the restlessness and the constant need for new.
Mhm.
um yeah, but shortly after I got back to New York City, I was like, I had spoken to my producer a lot about this, who lives out here as well, and he was telling me for a while, I think you should really be out here.
Mhm.
And I decided to go
Decided
and
to do it.
told myself at the end of my lease in New York that time around, at the end of my lease in NYC that time, I was going to go. And here
And
I
then you
am.
made the trek, and then you have a song kind of about it ish, right? Runaway. I mean, it's kind of alludes to everything you were talking about as far as being restless and wanting to move and not being in one spot.
Absolutely.
Well,
Partially that's about, yeah.
tell me about the song.
So Runaway was actually born out of a song that I had started writing in 2021 at the time that I decided to eventually get myself out to Los Angeles. Um, and I wrote it partially about wanting to run away in a physical sense, but I think arguably more so it's about running away in an emotional sense from the idea of vulnerability and the idea of starting over again in life, so to speak, because I had to do all of that, by coming to LA and leaving the Northeast and everything that comes with it. And yeah, I mean, it was also inspired by, Scorpio season, my album, and Scorpio Rising, the EP, was written about a specific time in my life, involved in a former relationship of mine that took a huge toll on me emotionally, huge toll
Mhm.
on me emotionally. And I detail that all through the album and my EP. Runaway was, meant to be symbolic of a brand new chapter for me and a new beginning as well. On the romantic side of things, on the moving to LA side of things, I kind of explore a new sound on this song too. So I thought that, a title like Runaway, and it representing, me being scared of a new beginning, it was appropriate to kind of have it be a switch up in my style and a switch up in my sound too. I think I just thought it was lightning in a bottle to kind of be a good way to return to releasing music, because Runaway is the first track I've put out since the album.
Yeah. I was gonna say, and you talked about how it's sonic a little bit different. Yeah, I think it's got this cool, like kind of synthy, but it's like a dark kind of undertone to it.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'm like super inspired by The Weeknd and everything he's been doing over the last few years. He's my guy.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, After Hours, like his album, After Hours,
Mhm.
I mean, that got me through the pandemic. Like,
Really?
full
Yeah.
stop. Yeah. 100%.
Oh, it's like, I mean, I dig the song. It's a great record. Is it something that I mean, did you write that and record it once you had got to LA, or was it kind of, you said you started it prior, but I mean, like when you finish it, were you like, okay, I'm here now? Um,
No, I was in between, because actually, I mean, I could go into what a difficult process it was to move across the country. It was tough.
I
Um,
bet. I've recently moved to Nashville from San Diego,
oh
that
man,
was a nightmare.
yeah, like,
But I can't imagine going even further from New York to LA.
moving sucks.
Oh, it's the worst.
It is. But anyway, so I wasn't fully here yet. I was living in an Airbnb in Studio City,
Okay.
not far from where I live right now. And I was just going over to my producer's house and working on the track. And we did the production. We actually did the production in early 2022. I was still living in New York then. And then I came to LA, was looking for a place, was crashing in an Airbnb. And then I did the vocals and everything else at the end of last year,
Okay.
6 months ago.
And what about other music? Do you have? Are you working towards another EP or album or project right now?
Maybe.
Oh, maybe.
Um, I do have
Okay.
other songs that are in the canon to come out later this year.
That's
Um,
exciting.
it is exciting. It is really exciting. I really like dig this new sound that we're going for. This kind of like 80s synthy uh, thing that we've decided to do and capitalize on. I was doing more like dark R&B, more moody leaning stuff on my EP and album, and I think that this newer sound reflects where I'm at, on a personal level too. Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, we're gonna dive deeper into that sound and release a few more tracks, and it might culminate in an EP or album. It might not. I think it's more likely that it will, but I'm not there yet. I don't have
Okay.
a title or anything quite yet.
Dig it. Well, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for doing this, Hunter. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I have one more question for you. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Yes, I would say that. Well, I mean, there's a few things that come to mind, but I think one of the most valuable things that I've learned is that there are a lot of people that you will come across in the business that will not put your best interests at heart, perhaps. But the people that you will meet that really value you and respect you and care about you as a human being and make you feel that, keep them around. They're good for your artistry and they're good for your soul.